Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I get asked a lot about beginners practicing on material that's been heavily discounted because of cracking and crazing. Now we will work on this stone and carve it up, and as you can see, it does have a few little issues. If I look around the bar, you'll see there's various places where crazing and cracking is starting to take place. Now I do want to mention there's an incredibly good article published in Minerals from last year sometime that I saw recently. I believe it was called Cracking of Gem Opals. I can't remember the authors, but I think I remember the first author's first name being Boris. It talked a lot about cracking and crazing in gem opal, particularly focusing on the difference between water stored opal and dry stored opal. It's super interesting. I've been meaning to do a video on it for a while, so I must have it backed up somewhere. And I don't know, if there's interest, let me know and I'll go through a bunch of different science papers because opal has been studied a lot, including this little phenomena here. So you can see right there, that whitening, that is the crazing setting in. And then there's some spots where it has actually transitioned into cracking. Actual fractures, like just over here. Now, in terms of, is it good for a beginner to practice on? I have to say not really, because a lot of the time the stone might just randomly fall apart on you, and you don't know if it's because of something you've done or something that was pre-existing, where a crack is already really set in. But if you do have a lot of that kind of material, I hope you didn't pay very much for it, and I'll show you today that we can actually work on it. So we'll work on this piece. I think this is a piece of Mintaby. It sounds pretty glassy and hard, so I'm guessing it's Mintaby. Could be Coober Pedy. I can't exactly remember where this stone came from. Either way, it's cracking, it's crazing. We're gonna do a little bit of work on it. That looks like it might be the start of something serious as well, but we'll dive into it and have a good look at it. And away we go. We're starting off with the 80 grit sintered diamond because I did have a suspicion that this was Mintaby, though some of the sand in it made me think it was Coober Pedy. Either way, if it is Coober Pedy, it's a very hard glassy material and it takes a lot of effort to get rid of. So the 80 grit sintered diamond was pretty much the only hope. Going any finer grit than that, you would be sitting there forever. Pretty aggressive, pretty hard grinding. The shape of the burr at this point doesn't really matter at all, but you will see that I change it up. And here, once I've taken off the crust, you can see that crazing is in. It is in, and it is in pretty strong. At this point, I had very low hopes, but I was completely wrong. This stone worked out incredibly well, as you'll soon see. You can see here, very jagged, very rough. I'm not thinking about the shape or anything at that point. We're literally removing material. Here, I'm doing a little bit of tizzying of the edges just because I'm trying to get a good idea of what the stone's going to look like. And now I'm kind of designing a bit of a shape. It's kind of like that Superman symbol or like a odd shaped diamond. So we're just going to trim it back. I just used some permanent marker to just mark it up into a general rough guide. You can tell it's not a stenciled shape or anything. It's going to pretty unusual shape. And then to get those edges nice and square, I'm actually going to a burr that has a straight edge on it. You can see there as well, there's a good little crack in that one. So we're going to still work and try to get that one gone. And surprisingly, I do lose that at some point. I don't exactly know where. I'll have to look through the footage a bit more to work out when I lost it. But in the final stone, I couldn't see it. So very interesting. I'm also taking off a little bit of the edges and just not really doming it, but just rounding the edges. So if I do end up bezel setting this, I'll be able to grip onto something. And you can see when I'm working on the face, quick movements, pretty circular. And that's just to get rid of all of the little sand burrows that I burred out right near the start. And then here you can see this is kind of what it looks like. A few chips here and there, still that crack, and you get that general fog. That's when I'm going to move over to the hard resin burrs. Once you dunk it in water, of course, you don't see much of that. Oh, actually no, of course, I do a 600 grit sintered diamond. Because I was just using the 80 grits all that time, I need to hit it with the 600 just to get it a little bit foggier. You'll see at the end of this what it looks like. It's a lot better and a much smoother transition. Every stone I use the 600 grit sintered diamond. Probably the most important tool that I have. And then you can see here we're going to the 200 grit hard resins. The 200 grit is actually very similar to the 600 grit sintered diamond. The metal bonding makes it a little bit harder, but the resin is pretty hard. It's pretty aggressive. And you can see this is the 200, but I go through 200, 400, 800, 1500 and 3000 to get to the final kind of pre-polished stage, which we can look at in a second. But it's nice having these big burrs compared to the Novas. The big burr here is really helping because it gives me a bit of a straight edge to tidy that up a bit. And you can see here, looking at it dry, you get that nice gentle fog. So it's no longer a really pitted fog or a scratched mess. It is just a nice, smooth, gentle fog. You wouldn't call it a polish or anything like that. It's definitely not there yet, but that's where the last step comes in, and that is the cerium oxide on felt. Now, I'm actually going to go over this stone again. I think the aluminium oxide will be a little bit better. When the opal becomes this hard and this glassy, I do find that the aluminium oxide has some benefit. It does remove it and get a nice smoother finish, but the cerium oxide does work. It just takes a bit longer. I spent a fair time on it, but I should have spent more, or I should have used the aluminium oxide. You're always, no matter what stone you're working, whether it's opal or fire agate or anything really, you've got to really nail your final polish, whether you're going to go cerium oxide, aluminium oxide, and I've got videos on this, including things like diamond paste. All of them are slightly different, and over time, if you work one material, you'll definitely just narrow down to one. But me, working on a lot of different types of opal and mixing in a few other things here and there, I do need the variety. So I've got the diamond paste, I've got the aluminium oxide, and the cerium oxide. And one thing I never cover is how much cerium oxide you actually use. So this is the wastewater that I collected at the end. And you can see it's just a really disparate spread of cerium oxide particles floating around in there. You're really not using much. 1 teaspoon of powder will last a very long time. And then the final stone. Well, there we are. This has actually worked out pretty well, which is a little bit disappointing because I actually thought this was going to be a good example of crazing really destroying a stone and making it crumble. If you have a look at this shot, you can see that there is a lot of chipping, and I'm still going to say that though this material can be found pretty cheap because of the crazing on the outside, that can go all the way through and it can be much worse than this shot that I put up. You'll notice there's a lot of little chips left over in the water when I drain it. And you might think that's not a bad thing because you're getting rid of them. But for a beginner, I highly advise double thinking buying this material and really working on it, because it actually does take quite a lot of skill to get it to the point where it can come up clean, and sometimes it just won't come up clean. There are a couple little crazing white lines and a little crack that I've kind of actually lost now because I worked on it so long. I've actually managed to get rid of it. And the chipping, yes, it does go away, but every time you get a little chip out of a corner somewhere, it is super annoying. You have to then be able to buff that chip out, round the whole area again around it, flatten it out, start again, hope that it doesn't chip. And just because I've got all of that crazing and cracking out of this stone doesn't mean that this stone won't now continue to go that way. So I'm going to sit this one in a container and just keep it there for at least a couple of months, if not a couple of years, just to watch it before I set it or anything. Though I am a huge fan of the shape. I think if I were to make it into a pendant, I'd probably hang it in that direction. It's kind of like an uneven diamond if you hang it from this kind of direction. And being Mintaby, it has gone a little bit directional, which is a bit annoying. So if I get it at the right angles, you can see it really shines and flashes, but then on others, it's kind of a bit flat. Classic Mintaby. But you know what? Now that it's done, I'm just gonna have to sit it aside and wait to see if anything goes wrong with it. Just because it's been crazing in the past, I would not be confident just straight up setting this one and getting it sold and sending it off, because it'd be super disappointing for someone to have a beautiful stone like this and then just find that it starts crumbling apart in its own setting over time. I'm not overly confident in it unless it's sat around for quite some time, like more than a year. If it doesn't crack or craze after that, I'm pretty certain I could set it and ship it, but until then I can't be 100% sure, and you never want to disappoint someone with the stone. I try to get people into opal, not chase them out by giving them something dodge. But anyway, good stone. Follow up in a year and we'll see if it's cracked and crazed, because that will give me another video. Beginners, I still advise you to stay away from this stuff. Honestly, if you really just want to practice cutting and polishing, you're better off with potch. This stuff can be a huge headache. In fact, I would say if you're going to buy crazed material, you really need to be pretty advanced. Otherwise, it's going to be very disheartening and very confusing and very annoying, and you'll not know what you're doing right or wrong. Practice, 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 get good. It won't take very long. Once you get it, it kind of clicks and you get it, and then take on some trickier material. Things with big flaws, big imperfections, possible sand, possible cracks, possible crazing, all that kind of stuff. It actually adds complexity. The stones might look like they're a bargain, but trust me, when you start working on it and you spend a good 10 hours on a stone, yeah, you're going to be crying yourself to sleep if it doesn't work out. And that's a good way to force yourself to quit, and we don't want that. But can't stare at the stone forever, so it's coming up on midnight. Good night, guys. I am going to get to work on the other stone, but I think I'll probably sleep before then. Stay safe, have fun, hopefully you come across some better opal than me.